Welcome to KLEAN Radio. How are you doing, Judah?
I am good, and you are not good. You are sick.
I am sick, yes. I was very sick last week, and I'm sort of sick tonight.
But like a trooper, you decided to come in, and you know, you're in your boxing outfit.
That's right. I'm in my sick boxing outfit. It's like transition quickly from bed to the car to radio host.
But your wife took care of you.
She did.
That's why it's good to have a wife.
Well, one of the reasons.
And what else? So it's not your cold carrier.
My cold urticaria.
Your cold urticaria.
Yeah, I know you love talking about it.
I do love talking about it. It's an affliction that hits people. What is it?
I'm actually allergic to temperature change.
Temperature change.
Yeah, so when things get cold, I break out in hives.
Is there a support group for anything like that?
No, not yet.
There could be like a 12-step group.
Be me and like two other people, I think.
Have you found anybody else that has that?
Actually, there's a couple people that I diagnosed that didn't know what they had, and I was able to tell them what it was.
In chat rooms or?
No, this was all pre-sort of internet, and since then I've only heard of one other person, so I've only heard of 3 people that have had it.
Why don't you start a forum?
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, I guess. It's, you know, when I first found out about it, I was actually, nobody knew what it was, none of the doctors, they thought I had a food allergy or whatever, and I ended up being in Cambridge, England at Cambridge Medical School. My dad was on a tour, he's a biophysicist, and he was there speaking, I believe, and a friend of ours was in Cambridge Medical School there, and he goes, "Oh, you have cold urticaria." And we're like, "What's that?" And he's like the only guy that knew. And it turned out they didn't have any treatment for it, but then it turns out now they have very strong antihistamines that are good. So
very interesting.
Yeah.
And the number here is 877-8-830-830. That's 877-8-830-830. This is a show about
not cold urticaria.
Not cold urticaria. What are we about?
We're about addiction and recovery,
which is very topical right now. Yeah. Extremely topical.
We seem to actually be the hot topic on with Charlie Sheen and, you know, whatever, with Dr. Drew coming out now with his show on Headline News.
Oh, Dr. Drew has another show?
I believe it's starting in April, yeah.
It's called I Am a Whore.
Oh, no. It's really wrong.
I will do anything for money.
I don't think his intentions are that bad.
Well, the views of what I say are my own views.
Well, let's make sure that's clear. Yeah. Well, we've got an interesting night tonight, and I'm glad that even though I feel a little under the weather, I could be here for tonight's show. We have some great guests.
We have a person with a wiki page.
That's right.
That's like a hard thing to get. And we're in the studio with Lowell Cauffiel.
Not if you write it. You write your own wiki page.
One second. Did you write your own wiki page?
I've edited my own wiki
But
page.
you have to have a certain something to get a wiki page.
Yeah, you've got to at least be, I think, in the Library of Congress or be arrested a few times.
So you wrote your own wiki profile?
And I've done both. I've been arrested a few times. And,
so you have 2 wiki pages?
No, I have just 1 wiki page. But it first went up to, I think my publisher first put it up, and I've amplified it and corrected it.
Because that's a hard thing to get. I know that it's not an easy thing to get as a wiki page. You can't just be, I know somebody recently, the reason I say that, I know somebody recently that was trying to get a wiki page and they could not get, that,
Barry Robinson, who's Smokey Robinson's son, who's a friend of mine, he has more on his wiki page than you can imagine, and it's like they knew there's the name of his dog when he was young, and like things that you would never things that he didn't even remember. So it gets a little scary. There's a line between, some information and then where it gets kind of over the top.
And Lowell is an amazing author and one of the preeminent crime novelists of probably the last 20 to 30 years.
Well, nonfiction crime.
Nonfiction crime writers.
As a crime novelist, I did three crime novels, but didn't have the success with those that I've had with nonfiction. And some of my nonfiction crime books, or true crime books as they used to be called, are on like a lot of the top 25 lists of all time.
Right. Well, what got my attention was that I saw you on Forensic Files one night, not as the subject of the show, but as one of the books he wrote. 2 of the books you wrote were used in cases on Forensic Files.
Yeah, I've been on Forensic Files, MSNBC, A&E. I'm the only author who's ever been on A&E with a mullet. I went through a stage where I was riding a Harley Davidson around the country for a couple of years, and then A&E came into town, or the producers did, and wanted to do this thing, And I went and did all the interviews, and then when it came on, my teenage son at the time said, "Dad, you're on TV with a mullet," and I did. I had an actual mullet.
So was it business in the front, party in the back, or was it just party all over?
No, it was business.
So you were like the real rebel Truman Capote.
No, it was a Euro mullet. A Euro mullet, as classified by Mullets Galore. Which is a great website. I would recommend to anybody. Mullets Galore. They've got thousands of mullets taken all across the country, and they have them classified. Like, they have the woman mullet. They have something called a dicullet.
Is that for, like, mullet fetishes, I guess?
I guess. It's a popular website. I think it does some pretty good business.
And so you had a mullet galore. When was this?
No, I wasn't on Mullets Galore, but my son directed me. Yeah, my son directed me to Mullets Galore, and I found my mullet on there, and it was a Euro mullet.
What year was this?
Oh, God, this was in the 90s. And then, I got a phone call from the 70s, and they said, we want your hairstyle back, and I cut it.
So you're in one of the support groups, one of the 12-step groups. Were you in that at the time, or were you sober with a mullet?
Yeah, I was sober with a mullet. It shows you a vision for you.
That's even more fascinating to me.
Yeah. No, I've got 26 years. 26 continuous years.
So you rode around the country. He's got a cool bike, by the way. Not a scooter like me. He's actually got a motorcycle.
Yeah, 87 Harley Davidson FXR. Yeah.
And you rode around America on it?
I got to some interesting places, like the 95th anniversary of Harley Davidson. When my dad died, he left it to me, and I jumped on it the day after his funeral, drove it to his grave, laid it down around his grave, and did what's called a pinwheel, which is you tear up the grass with the rear wheel, and signed his grave with his own motorcycle, and literally was on that bike for the next 2 years. It was a really interesting journey, in fact, because I kind of discovered him through his motorcycle and got a relationship with him after his death that I never really had, when we were alive, because he was kind of this bigger-than-life individual. So, yeah, it was in fact, I did a book proposal for a book called Miles to Go. It's a Miles to Go Before I Sleep. And we took it to New York, my agent, and had meetings with all these publishers, and they kept saying, but people who ride motorcycles don't know how to read. And even though I presented statistics that 75% of Harley-Davidson owners have at least a bachelor's degree and made at least $75,000 to $125,000 a year. And in the Getty Museum at the time, they had 100 Years of the Motorcycle exhibit. I still couldn't convince these editors that anybody would read it. Yeah.
But yet they have no problem picking up a show called Swamp People.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's funny because we were talking about that on the ride in. We were. I found myself yesterday watching this show called How Do They Make It? And literally I was watching How Do They Make Paintbrushes.
I think it's called How It's Made.
How It's Made.
Yeah.
And I felt really sorry for myself. I felt that I have hit a new low in my life.
Now, what is Swamp People? This is the second time I've heard today about Swamp People. What is Swamp? I haven't seen that one.
It's a show about, I guess it's about a family that lives on a swamp.
In Louisiana.
In Louisiana.
Yeah.
I didn't know that until you just said that, and it's this whole what is it? Like, I guess it's the Travel Channel, or it's Nat Geo. It's like it's in the 285, 284 on DirecTV because I'm addicted to investigation discovery. Great channel.
Well, thank God they're not calling it Wetlands People, and they're calling it Swamp People, because that's what we used to call wetlands or swamps in Michigan, where I'm from.
That's. Yeah, but and it's like, and you wonder though, why wouldn't they? That's the amazing thing about this town is that Tony Dennison, Tony Dennison, who was on the show. He always says whenever he pitches, he would always love the people that pitched, Hogan's Heroes, because if you could pitch a prisoner of war, a comedy about a prisoner of war in World War II, and you could get that show on the air, that's who I want pitching for me. But there's no rhyme or reason to anything. Because I love that idea about you traveling with your Harley.
Yeah.
And you were sober at the time.
Yes, absolutely. I think the greatest pitch of all time was Cop Rock. To convince a network that we're going to have a police show like an opera with cops singing, that to me is, I want that guy pitching for me. In fact, I know who it is that pitched the show. But
I want Dr. Vegas guy, because I've always been fascinated. I've always thought about that pitch. What was it? Well, we got a doctor.
Right.
Think the Love Boat in Vegas.
But that's the great thing about sobriety is, when you've kind of taken a trip through the underside of the world as an addict or an alcoholic, and then you get sober. myself, I found that I'm willing to try so many different things because I think, well, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? Well, the worst thing already has possibly happened in my life, and I was able to recover from it. So why should I shy away from, like, getting on a bike for 2 years, or, you know, if I've got the resources to do it, or take chances in my career? You know, I mean, I came out to Los Angeles 8 years ago, left the book business, and, you know, I'm pitching TV. I've sold quite a few pilots and some films, and everybody said, "You're out of your mind. You know, you're 50 years old. You're moving to Los Angeles from your home base." And I thought, well, what are they going to do? Make me drink? You know?
Right.
Well, I find very, you know, it's one of those things that I've always been fascinated by is people always, because we were talking about this actually before the show, you know, the idea of musicians, that you need to be a drinker to be a you know, like some of my best music was written drunk. Right. Which but not that my personally, because I can't write music, but you hear that constantly. Like, I can't write if I'm not, like, my creativity is stirred.
The Bukowski image,
right? You know, Hunter. So you've written so much.
Well, you know, I used to sit on the end of a bar stool in a place called the Anchor Bar. It was the newspaperman's bar, because I started out in journalism. I spent 15, 16 years with the Detroit News, which at the time was the biggest African daily in the country. Huh. And very heavy drinker, you know, half a gallon of Jim Beam a day, you know, the alcoholic equivalent of a wake and bake. I had to have a couple of drinks in the morning. And when I discovered the morning drink, I thought that I discovered the Holy Grail.
Right, I think everybody has that.
Yeah,
that
I don't have to be hungover.
Right.
I can just keep going. You know?
Right.
And
I can actually drink in the morning.
Yeah. and I can recall so clearly sitting on the end of that bar stool, looking in the mirror and thinking about all the books that I would, you know, perhaps would one day write, but I needed to suffer. And they had all the dead newspaper men in pictures above the top of this bar, because it was a newsman's bar, and people used to say it's the dead drunks looking down at the live drunks. Huh. And but I never wrote a book there, you know. Right. I never accomplished really anything there. I never got fired. I was winning awards, but they were all second place and third place, you know, newspapering and feature awards and stuff like that. And then when I got sober, 8 months into it, I had my first book contract. Suddenly I was writing books. So that's an illusion or a delusion that you have to suffer, or there has to be some kind of like chemical involved or whatever to get to that creative spot. I've often wondered, like, what would Hemingway have done if he had been sober? I mean, because in the end, the reason he blew his head off is he just didn't have the, you know, he didn't have the...
He was just done.
He didn't have the mojo anymore. You know, he had writer's block. But well, I'd have writer's block, too, if I was drinking as much as he was for that many years. You know?
Actually, mind block.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, there's so many lies that I told myself, you know. Mm-hmm. You would drink, too, if you had to go to homicide scenes. You know, you would drink, too, if you had to interview victims of tragedies like I did when I was in the news business. But, you know, if you look around the whole spectrum of things, yeah, you know, the construction worker drinks because, you know, he puts a hard day in on a job. My dad used to say bricklayers drink a lot because there's a lot of lime in the mortar and their mouth gets real dry, you know.
Right.
And doctors drink because they have so much responsibility of life and death. And assemblymen, you know, auto assemblymen drink a lot because their job is boring. And you can go right down the line, you know. You know, homeless people drink because they got nothing else to do.
Right. Everybody's got an excuse.
Everybody's got an excuse, right? And it's part of that old idea that you tell yourself for all that time. But I mean, today I don't even know how I'd work it into my schedule. I don't know where it would even fit in.
Well, you probably wouldn't even be in L.A.
Yeah. Well, no, I'd probably be about 6 feet.
Right. Or you'd still be at the Anchorman bar.
Or my liver would be on display, you know, at the coroner's office as, you know, the liver that could, you know.
Right. You know, it's funny because you were talking about that. One of my favorite writers, always I would read the New York Post, and a guy by the name of Steve Dunleavy, I mean.
I got Steve Dunleavy's story.
Right, which is like, he's like this, I don't know if you're, Andrew, if you're familiar with him, but he's just I don't believe he writes for them. Is he alive?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I've got a Steve Dunleavy story for you.
But he's a person that writes for the New York Post. But he has more talent probably in one finger than most writers would ever dream of. But but in the end of the day, he only wrote for the New York Post. You know, and there's something to be said for that. You know, there's something to be said for well, it's great. He could have imagined what he could have done without the booze.
Let me tell you my Steve Dunleavy story. He was working for Hard Copy. Remember, he was on that tabloid show. Mm-hmm. This was about 20 years ago. My first book came out. I was on the bestseller list, and he came to Detroit to do a story on my book and the murder story. It was the name of the book is Masquerade: A True Story of Seduction, Compulsion, and Murder. And
it's a great name.
And he comes out, and I was to meet him at Metro Airport. And he said, "Meet me in the Cheers bar. I'm sure you have one, you know, because they have those Cheers bars and all that.
Chain of them or whatever."
Right. He says, "Meet me in the Cheers bar at 8 a.m. And we'll go from there." So I get to the bar at 8 a.m., and there he is already pouring a tall one. And he says, "Come on and have a drink with me, mate." And I said, "I don't drink." And he looked at me and goes, "Retired champion, did you?" And so I still use that line when people offer me a drink. I say, "No, I retired champion."
That's from Steve Dunleavy. That's
he was a character.
He was a character. But again, it's you know, I'd rather be a working man than a legend than a
dead legend.
And I think sometimes we do romanticize so much in our society. It's like, you know, I'd go to Red Rock, which is that bar in Hollywood, and the wall is littered. Literally, I think every picture is a dead rocker that died at the age of 27.
Right.
And I don't see the romanticism in that.
But then look, you know, out of that period, I mean, out of my generation, look at Jeff Beck. And Jeff Beck or Ted Nugent, both of them sober, both of them with no drug and alcohol problems. Jeff Beck was just nominated for a Grammy in the rock thing. His latest album is fantastic. He's expanded as a guitar player. So it's an illusion, you know, that you've got to kill yourself to get good.
Right. And the number here is 877-830-830. That's 877-830-830. I was a little weak out of practice with that number.
Right.
A little tongue twisted. You look like death.
I'm not doing all that well. I'm hanging in there.
Down?
Yeah, you probably should. Let's take a break and we'll be right back. It's Clean Radio.
Do you suspect a loved one is abusing drugs? Call Clean Treatment Center at 888-601-6040 for a free drug test and consultation. A treatment advisor is available to help you administer the test and answer any questions you may have regarding treatment and more. We are here to help. Call us today at 888-601-6040 or find us online at cleantreatmentcenter.com for your free drug test and the start of a promising future.
Welcome back to Clean Radio. I'm Judah with my co-host Andrew Spanswick.
Yes, and my illness.
And your illness, your many of illnesses. We've actually, and we're in the studio
too already tonight.
We're in the studio with Lowell Cauffiel, acclaimed author, and we found out tonight from Lowell, we're discussing sicknesses in the studio, that Lowell, when he gets a flu shot, his teeth feel like he's going to come out.
Yeah, I feel like they're coming around my jaw. I don't do them anymore.
And Andrew has either a cross between typhoid or arsenic poisoning.
Yeah.
Now, see, that's a true dope fiend. I didn't say I get a flu shot. I say I do a flu shot.
You do a flu shot. Yes. You don't even let the pharmacist like give it to you. You're like,
no, I want to inject it myself. Yeah.
So you said before you've been sober 26 years.
Right.
That's pretty impressive because you don't look a day over 42.
Well, thank you, Judah.
And so you were quite young when you got sober.
33, 34 years old.
I'm not going to say in those days that was young, but 26 years ago that was young.
Yeah, although at that time that was 1984. So
what a year to get sober.
Yeah, right. But it wasn't like it wasn't. You know, in many earlier years where there was just really old guys, and it was kind of weird. But, you know, like Bill Wilson, who founded Alcoholics Anonymous, was 39, which is pretty young when he got sober. So
he just looked older.
Yeah, right.
Because all the pictures we ever see of him are like he's like 68.
Dude, anybody from the 60s on back,
you always look old.
They look old.
Yeah, it's like a Billy Crystal joke. If you you could exchange every Jewish family album. You know, everybody just looks cold and miserable. You know, they all have a jacket on and look old.
Yeah, I mean, Humphrey Bogart looked like he was 50 when he was 30.
Right.
It's a lot of black and white photographs.
Gene Hackman, the same thing. I mean, he's like the last of that. I mean, when he was 30, he looked 80.
Yeah, he's always
he looks younger now.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him in well, not that I've ever seen him personally. But anyways, getting back to you, so you got sober in Detroit.
Yeah, I was working as a newsman at the time, I'd covered the 1980 presidential campaign, a bunch of other stuff, and you know, I mean, the whole drinking thing just started out as something to do after work, and then it, you know, like just about everybody else's story that has gone through this, it just kept escalating and escalating. Then I began doing deep research into various substances from Peru and Bolivia, and was distributing those substances among the journalistic community in Detroit. And I came up with this great idea one day. This is kind of a funny story. I went up to the city editor and I says, you know, there's a lot of middle-class people and upper-class people who are doing cocaine. He goes, really? I says, yeah, you know, doctors, lawyers. I says, I think I can do a story on it. He says, what do you need? I says, you know, pretty good expense account. I says, you can cut me loose for a couple of weeks. So I go out and I just interviewed all my friends, you know. But, you know, and gave them anonymity in the story. And
Right.
at the end of all the research, I had all the human element. I said, well, I ought to get the police angle on this. So I decided to go on a raid with the head of the narcotics division of the Detroit Police Department, right? And so we go busting into this biker's house with the ram and the whole thing, and they tear apart this guy's house, and they cut open his couch, you know, with razor blades. They're looking for the dope, and it's just this huge, monstrous, like, raid scene, right?
Right.
Just like out of the movies. And Inspector Dwyer, who was the head of narcotics at the time, goes, all right, Cauffiel, come in here. Let me show you what we're looking for. And out of the cookie jar, he pulls like just 2 grams of coke. He says, this is what we're looking for. And I thought, shit, we could have gone to my house. We could have gone to my house and had a much better... you're gonna have to bleep that.
Yes.
So I think the engineer missed it.
I think the engineer is on a dump.
Well, I thought we could have gone to my house and had a much better raid, you know, because what I was holding at the time was way beyond.
So you really organized your whole life around drinking and using,
right?
Like literally, almost. It sounds like every single thing you wrote. You know, you created stories.
But you know, here's what the interesting thing that happened. Excuse me, is that I got off any of the illegal substances,
right?
And I thought that then my drinking would just like return to back to social level, and it didn't. And so there was a couple of more years of just, you know, solid alcohol, and then I just reached this point where, you know, I'm writing stories with front page bylines like busting people for, you know, unethical behavior and stuff like that, but living a double life at the same time. I thought, God, if anybody wrote a story on me, they'd just, you know, it would be a hell of a story. And I reached that I just didn't recognize myself anymore, and ended up going to one of the guys in the newsroom that was sober and said, you know, I need some help. But I never went through treatment. You know, I've done it all with, you know, support groups, and have been, you know, clean and sober ever since.
So you're one of those rare few that made a decision and stuck to it.
Yeah, and it was an ugly bottom. I mean, I had nothing left, and but I never lost my job. I never crashed a car. I crashed an airplane.
Whoa.
You know.
What do you mean you crashed an airplane?
I'd had a couple of 6-packs of beer and got in an ultralight airplane, and the guy said you can taxi it around on the runway, you know, but don't take off. And I decided
you're going to try and fly.
Yeah, so I took off. Next thing I know, I'm like 20 feet in the air, and I'm going, what am I doing?
That's when you realize you're not a pilot.
Yeah.
Like you might have told tons of stories where you were, but that's when you're actually in the air going, wait, that story where I was a commander in the Air Force? Not true.
Right. So I let off the throttle, and it nosedived, and I'm lucky I wasn't decapitated by the propeller. It was, you know, there were a lot of those kind of close calls. So.
And that was it.
Yeah. And you know, then began the journey of recovery, which is a long and ongoing, you know, journey. The interesting thing to me about addiction and alcoholism is there's this myth that it's the drugs and alcohol that cause all the problems. Yeah, they cause problems, but I like to say that for the drug addict or the alcoholic, the problem isn't drugs or alcohol. The problem is the lack of drugs and alcohol, because every time I tried to clean up or get sober, I eventually got faced with that sort of irritable, restless, discontent self, and that's what always sent me back. And to me, that's, you know, where support groups come in, and getting, you know, the kind of proper treatment comes in, is that you have to learn to get through life without medicating yourself.
How many times did you try and get sober before it actually stuck?
I had one 5-day break 1 year before my last binge. My last binge lasted a year. Right. So from the first time I actively sought help from an outside source, through support groups, I've been sober ever since.
And then after you
I didn't have, and I let other people relapse for me. I mean, whenever I see somebody relapse, I go up and thank them. I say, hey, thanks for doing some homework.
I'm sure they must love you.
Yeah, they do. I love doing it, though.
It's interesting, though, because you talked about how, for you, sort of the testing was that you stopped using illicit drugs, and then you found that you became worse of an alcoholic, or the alcoholism progressed onward. So you kind of tested yourself before you got sober, whether or not you could get sober in a way.
Yeah, well, the other big myth is that it's the substance that somehow determines your addiction. No, it's you that determine your addiction. Right. You try. For me, it was finding a way to feel complete and feel whole, and whatever it took to do that. And it was illegal substances for a while, and I thought, well, that's the problem. Or pot's the problem, or coke's the problem, or Valium is the problem. Alcohol's not the problem, but the problem was Lowell.
Right.
That's where the problem is, and so it's like you have a furnace, and anything that burns in it will work. So, it's so funny before you get sober and before you clean up, what you think being clean or sober is. We have no conception of what it's like on the other side, other than to try to go dry,
right.
Which is
I often hear so much from people that have been alcoholics or are alcoholics, and they get sober, and they just can't believe that nobody else is drinking once they get sober. Like, they just think that when you're drinking, you assume everybody always drinks around you.
I didn't trust anybody that didn't drink.
Really?
I mean, I would not. I said there's something wrong with them. Yeah.
Mike Tyson said that. He said, if you wouldn't drink with me, I won't sign a contract with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, he was an alcoholic.
And he lost all his money. It might not be the best guy to trust. But our heads are crazy, because I remember when I got sober, I was walking around New York, right? And I believe it was probably Thanksgiving or Christmas or one of those. And I remember every time I would look at somebody, I would go, my God, they got to drink for 4 days straight. Like, I was jealous that I thought everybody in New York City was drinking for 4 days straight, and like they got a 4-day work, they got a 4-day, and that's all I could think. Because my thinking was so at that point off.
Right.
Yeah.
We really create off thinking for ourselves.
Our sense of perception is just completely blown out.
I actually feel good enough today that I can get loaded.
Well, I got sober on December 3rd, 1984, and Christmas was only 21 days away. And I remember the Christmas party for the family, and people were leaving half glasses of wine around. And I said, aren't you going to drink that? And they go, no, I'm done. And I'm thinking, why are you even drinking? I couldn't understand somebody leaving a half glass of wine. I can't leave a bottle of water today still. I got to finish a cup of coffee.
Right.
I mean, it's
and I guzzle it. I mean, there's no moderation with anything I drink. I was walking around Manhattan also with my friend Tony, and I remember looking into a bar, and I go, and he was a Brooklyn guy, and I go, oh my God, Tony, if only I was drinking. And I see these hot women inside. I go, if only I was drinking. He goes, what? You wouldn't get them either. He goes, I've heard your story, Judah. You weren't exactly Don Juan. And it was so funny because I needed to hear somebody say that to me, because we could romanticize things that never actually occurred. Which is fascinating to me.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, too, is that everything that I was looking for out of drugs and alcohol, I've achieved in sobriety, that missing piece. And it did work for a long time. I mean, I actually finally remember my good drinking days and the fun that I had in that. I don't have this aversion where I think negatively about all that. But, it goes through those 3 stages, the fun stage, fun and trouble stage, and the all trouble stage. I mean, they revoked my license to fun with it.
We're going to go to a phone call. Dawn, I don't know where you're calling from, Dawn, but hello, welcome to KLEAN Radio.
Hey, I'm calling from Los Angeles.
That's exciting.
Isn't it?
Yes. We're all familiar with it.
Yes, we are.
Great show, you guys, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for having it. I have a quick question about my husband. I'm not an addict, but he is. He's about 10 months sober now. And, things, when he first started to go into the program and do stuff, things got better relatively quickly. I'd say at about couple months in, and you know, things started to really improve, and lately problems have been coming up in our marriage with finances, and like he just, I kind of feel like financially he's still not working up to his potential. Like he's still kind of at a drinking job, and you know, he's not paying the bills, and I sort of let it kind of go for the last 10 months because I know he's been trying to get, you know, his life together. But I'm just wondering, at what point as a wife can I expect him to contribute and hold up his end of our marriage, you know, at least financially?
Yeah, Don, you know, the thing that I think is most important is that people be honest with each other and express what they're feeling. So, you know, a lot of it is about, you know, how do you communicate, you know, feelings you might be having with your husband, you know, that you don't think he's meeting his potential, or, you know, that you think now that he's had a chance 10 months to be sober, it's time for him to start doing more. And the big thing is, you know, have you actually tried to speak with him about that? Has there been any sort of conversation?
Well,
Or are you just holding, sort of holding on to it like a resentment and letting it build? Because that anger is really dangerous, and there's a lot of work that family members have to do along with.
But it is a good question. At what point do we become accountable? At what point is it, you know, that you're sober, you have to start paying your bills?
yeah, because
if that's what you're asking, it's like when are you
better enough to
right?
start
When is your
world?
free? When is it not progress? When is it? It's not progress, perfection type thing. Lowell?
Well,
as a guy that's been married a few times.
Can I ask Dawn a question?
Sure.
Yeah.
Dawn, how long was he an addict?
God, 15. I mean, ever since I've known him, he's been a really heavy drinker, and in the last 6 years, he got into some heavier stuff. And I got to be honest, I kind of did it with him, but then we had a kid, and you know, he said he wasn't doing anything for the last 2 years, but he was still drinking pretty heavily. So I'd say about 15 years at least.
All right, well, so my point is it took him 15 years to get sick, but in 10 months, he's supposed to get completely well in 10 months when it took him 15 years to get sick. Are you doing anything for yourself? Are like you going to Al-Anon? Are you doing anything for your own like peace of mind? Because look, I sympathize with you because it's not an easy road to be married to. Because I was married to an alcoholic too, and after I got sober, my wife continued drinking, and it was some pretty harrowing times. But are you doing anything for yourself? Are you involved in a support group yourself?
Yeah, I've been going to Al-Anon, and it took me a while, but I actually did get a sponsor, and she was actually the one who told me, because I had the bright idea that I should maybe talk to his sponsor and find out like what's going on, and she said that I can't do that, and it's not appropriate for me to have contact with his sponsor, and that's fine. I've accepted that. I guess I'm just trying, you know, we've had conversations, and I've talked to my sponsor about it with guidance from her. You know, we've had conversations, my husband and I, about, you know, what I sort of expect, you know, him to start doing in terms of contributing financially to our household. And, you know, they haven't gone well, I'm going to be honest, and you know, I feel like he has an inability to be honest about where he's at. Like, he's sort of telling me, yeah, you know, just give me some time, I'm getting it together, this is going on. To be perfectly frank, it sounds like he's acting like he's still drinking, even though I know he's not. He's just kind of blowing me off, and the fact of the matter is, like, I can't hold up. Like, we have a child now, like, and the expenses keep growing, and they're unexpected. This is our first kid. You know, there's expenses coming out of everywhere, and I feel like I'm sinking, but I don't want to put too much pressure on him because I'm afraid it's going to make him drink again.
Don, a lot of the things that you're speaking about have to do with what's called transactional natures of a relationship. And people get into relationships where they think that they give something, and then for that they expect something back from the other person.
It's like a sliding scale.
Yeah, sort of.
Quid pro quo.
Yeah, quid pro quo. And a lot of what you're talking about is that you feel sort of angry about the fact that he's not keeping up his side of that transactional relationship.
Right.
And that's really something that has to be worked out with a therapist, I think. You know, you have to be sitting there with someone that's a good intermediary between yourself and your husband so that you can express in a safe environment what's going on with you, and then your husband can also feel likewise, you know, be able to say what's going on with him. And I think that you'll probably find that there's a lot of underlying issues. You know, when people first get sober, there's not just the compassion that's needed for the person that's getting sober and then time that they need to figure out who they are now as a sober person and what they're going to do. But from the other side of it, from your side, there's generally a lot of resentment and anger that's built up, you know, over years and years of having to deal with an addict and all the problems that come along with that. And then also okay, you're sober now and everything should go the way it's supposed to go and you owe it to me. And you know, the process of healing, not just the alcoholic or the addict, but the family relationship is one and the same. You can't just have him get sober and have everything else work. It's all part of the process of recovery and sobriety. It's that family work, it's him staying on track, it's him developing, and then also the relationship recovering from all that damage.
But is he still, I mean, I don't really know anything about the 12-step program he's in. I just don't, is 10 months, like, I mean, is that
well, recovery is
still new?
You have a comment about this?
Yeah,
Lowell?
you know, one thing I would suggest that you do is to go to some open AA meetings to see speakers. So these are meetings where you don't have to be an alcoholic to go, and you can hear the stories of other alcoholics, and you'll begin and see that process so that you can learn about what's going on in his program and with those steps. And you're going to find one of the great things that happen if you go to some of these open meetings with speakers, you're going to find out that your situation isn't that unique and that there are solutions to your situation, and you can begin to live in the solution instead of living in the problem, because it is a process, and it's a long process. I remember, you know, my wife and I, or my wife at the time, you know, we met in a bar. I was playing in my blues band, and she was in the audience. And like 5 years into our marriage, one day we said, like, where did I meet you? You know, I mean, because we had changed so much in sobriety, we had to completely rebuild our relationship around not around Jack Daniels anymore. It was, you know, we actually had to begin to communicate. So it's a process.
And in your case, it didn't work.
Well, we stayed married 18 years, and
that's
then,
a long time.
Yeah, and then we parted. We decided we were bored with each other, and we held hands in front of the judge when we got divorced. It was a great non-resentful divorce.
Wow.
So.
Well, Don, I hope this has been helpful. One of the things I suggest is that if you go to Facebook and put in KLEAN Radio, KLEAN with a K, you can join our Facebook page, and then you can also reach out to us through cleantreatmentcenter.com. There's a phone number there, and we can help you get to meetings or find other resources throughout the community.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the call.
Thank you so much, Don, and take care.
Thanks.
So you seem to be feeling better when it comes to therapeutic talk. So maybe if only the questions and all we talk about is therapy, you're on your A game.
I'll do my therapy.
And what
thing.
did you call it? Transactional what?
Transactional relationships. Yeah, it comes out of what's called systems theory, but it talks about that there's different types of relationships, and one is transactional. And it's very common where people get into a relationship and they think, oh, I want to be in a relationship for my stuff. And then they say, you need to be in this relationship because you're going to give me this stuff. And so it's the transaction that you pay the bills and you do whatever, and you clean the house, the other one cleans the house. And
everybody's keeping score.
Right, everybody's keeping score. And
that's not good.
Right, no.
Right,
we have to take a break real quick. But we'll
and the number here is
877-8830-830.
That's 877-8830-830. You're listening to KLEAN Radio.
Suspect a loved one is abusing drugs? Call KLEAN Treatment Center at 888-601-6040 for a free drug test and consultation. A treatment advisor is available to help you administer the test and answer any questions you may have regarding treatment and more. We are here to help. Call us today at 888-601-6040 or find us online at cleantreatmentcenter.com for your free drug test and the start of a promising future.
Welcome back to KLEAN Radio. So we were just, it was a very interesting call from Don. It's really, I see that a lot at our treatment center, and I see that a lot with, people that I work with that have problems with addiction and problems with drugs, is that there's so much family work that needs to be done. And I think just, only fairly recently have people started to really look at the family system and how everything's really affected in the way it really needs to be done. And
well, for years you'd hear about, people making fun of Al-Anon in certain 12-step groups, which I can't think of anything more dangerous than making fun of a group that helps the family members.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I've heard it called the sisterhood of eternal vengeance. And what happens when an Al-Anon dies? Somebody else's life flashes before their eyes. There's all those Al-Anon jokes. But the interesting thing about that call is, and I've seen that with a lot of people I've worked with, is that the spouse wants instant results because they've suffered for so long, and then they think, okay, and again, the drug is gone, so therefore the problem is gone. Well, no, the problem is actually just starting to get revealed.
Right, and I think, and for the spouse as well, that they start realizing that, I'm actually really furious and angry.
Or I'm really married.
And I volunteered for this. Why did I do this for 15 years? And, that first year of sobriety is so difficult. It's, the first birthday, the first golf trip, the first fishing trip, the first baseball game, the first holiday. And when I work with people, it's just getting them through those first things every time. And often the people I work with, they'll say, my wife wants more of this, that. And I said, you just got to focus on just getting your sea legs. In the sobriety thing.
I think it's tough for people that haven't had a problem with alcohol or drugs to understand how difficult it is to actually stop. And it's not just the decision of making that decision, okay, I'm not going to use anymore, or turning it over to a higher power, or whatever it is that gets them to actually become sober. But then every decision after that of working your way into sobriety, it's very, very difficult. It's all new. And a lot of people have a lot of what we call identity arrestment, where they've they became arrested in their development at a point when they started using. So a lot of people who started drinking when they're 14, 15 years old, and they get sober when they're 30, they're 15 years old.
Well,
from a developmental standpoint.
Judah, that's why I look like I'm 35 years old.
That's right.
I started when I was 16. See, no, it's true, and I actually, I find that true in myself. I like the company of men who are 20 years. Younger than me. I mean, I relate more to the younger guy than guys my own age. They seem old to me.
I was going to say that's a whole different fellowship.
Yeah,
but,
no. Well, a lot of that's just experience, right? It's where you are in your life, and you form your identity and you have your life experience. But when you're heavily intoxicated for 10, 15 years, you really miss out on a lot. You don't realize it.
Well, you never work through an issue. You never work, she left me, I'll go get drunk, that solved it. You've never worked through a breakup. You've never worked through losing a job. You've never worked... It's just medicate
all those feelings.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think that with Dawn's case and with her husband who's 10 months sober, he's probably waking up and realizing, oh my goodness, I have all these responsibilities. I have a kid, I have a wife, and there's a lot of guilt involved in that too. And
there's a great solution: procrastinate.
Correct.
Well, I mean, I can't imagine, and one of the reasons I didn't get involved in the phone calls because I've never been married. Both of you are married. You've been married a few times, but I can't image anything scary.
Is it like a dig again,
like
Judah?
Times. I'm getting a lot of practice in Judah.
No, but
just two.
I mean, it's almost like you're waking up out of a blackout.
Yeah.
And you wake up one day and you look around as you're trying to get sober, and you look around and you go, did I do that? And they're like, is this mine?
Yeah,
is this my creation? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah. Well, my second wife and I, though, made the decision. We were both sober that even though we had got married in an inebriated state and been married a couple of years, but now we had, a son together, and I had custody of my daughter from my first marriage. And we said, we're going to do the right thing, and we're going to build a relationship between each other. And raise these kids. And once they were raised, then we decided, okay, that we've done our thing. And that was a bit of a sacrifice, but the payoff is great. And even with my ex-wife now, I mean, she's a family member. I mean, I fly her out here. She's some of my girlfriends haven't understood that too well, but she's a member of the family. And that's come from recovery and sobriety, and
that not everything has to be. That the end doesn't have to be like
Well, I think everybody assumes that there's going to be like a golden prize at the end of the rainbow, or a gold pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And the reality is that...
Well, not me, since I'm not married.
Well,
but
but these things are difficult, and often one person will get sober and they'll find out that the relationship was about one person enabling the other person to use, and there's different reasons why people do that. And I think that's why I think therapy is important, because sometimes therapy isn't about fixing something to be what people imagine in their head it is. Sometimes therapy is about figuring out that things aren't going to work, and that there needs to be a positive, directed way of ending a relationship.
Well, one of the things that the caller said was that she joined in with him. So that means their bond, which was they're using together, drinking together, whatever it was, has now been taken away. So they are now missing something in their relationship, and they need to rebuild something in that spot there.
How do you pick a marriage therapist? I have a therapist.
That's a good question.
Yeah, because I have a therapist, and he's on Team Judah.
Right.
Hopefully, so is my psychiatrist,
right.
My ex-life coach. Hopefully on Team Judah.
It takes a lot to keep you.
It takes a lot. It takes a lot to get me here tonight. But how do you do that when it's two people? I mean, that's got to be one of the hardest things in the world.
My advice is always let the wife pick the therapist. And truthfully, I think that women tend to feel more ganged up on by therapists than men do. And if you let the woman choose a therapist, it tends to work out better.
It's like a seat in a restaurant.
Yeah, sort of. But also, I think that, the best thing is to really ask around and talk to people. There's so many different types of therapists with so many different approaches. And, obviously in this case with Dawn and her husband, I look for someone that has experience with addiction, as well as, family systems theory, and definitely make sure that they're qualified. So I'd be looking for a master's level therapist.
Were you just shaking your head? Oh, are we about to take a break?
No, I was I'm too far away from the mic, even though I can't speak because of my cold. But anyway.
And we're going to bring in our next hour's guest in a minute.
Yes, we have
a very funny comedian.
Yes, Gabrielle
Francis.
Yes, we're going to bring her in, have her tell us about herself and what she's doing.
So it's basically only if you're talking about therapy do you get like really
I'm going to do the therapy talk and then
right. It's like everything else is like okay.
Yeah, he's starting. She's starting to fade.
It's
now,
like he gets right.
Yeah,
it's like he gets really excited when he talks about treatment. I was going to say this. I don't work for Andrew. I don't work for the Klean Center. And one of the things I absolutely love about Andrew, and you and I have been sober in this great Los Angeles area for a long time. There's a lot of, let's just say, not the most honest of folk in the treatment industry, and Andrew's one of the good guys, and it's very important, when you're going to get help, that you find one of the good guys, one of the good people, because it's got to be hard. It's got to be really rough out there. You have everybody trying to get you into treatment, into different facilities, and they'll promise you anything. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you're going to stop by this week, you got to see the Klean Center. It's amazing, and I'm not getting paid to say this. The place is amazing.
Well, I would use the same criteria I did if I had cancer or whatever. I'd want the best, doctor I could find, the best oncologist I could find. I'd want to know about the facilities, and there are treatment centers out there, and I use that word loosely, that essentially give you a bed, a couple of people with a little bit of sobriety as techs. A medical director, we were talking about this earlier, that's there maybe once a week, and you get what's called a $35,000 big book. They have a little white van, and they send you to AA meetings, where you get your stuff. And to me, that's not treatment.
Yeah, 97% of all rehabs or residential treatment centers are 12-step based. What's interesting about Klean is that we're actually not 12-step based. We do 12-step work, and we take people to meetings if they choose to while they're in treatment, but we work off what's called the Pennsylvania medical model. So we actually do a lot of work on diagnostic and assessment work with outside affiliated physicians, and we look for underlying dual diagnosis issues and psychiatric disorders, and we do a lot of individual therapy and a lot of family therapy.
One of the things I think is really important too is to understand a little bit of the science of addiction and alcoholism. And I did a grant, a $1 million grant with the National Institute of Alcoholism and Alcohol Abuse with some PhDs at the University of Michigan. and studied all the science of addiction. And when you look at the actual science, in the past 20 years have been amazing what they found about the neurotransmitters and the role of dopamine and the brain chemistry and everything going on. You have brain damage. You have a physical disorder in your brain that you can't think away.
I actually want to get back to that, but let's welcome in our guest, the lovely Gabrielle Francis. Gabriella. I'm sorry. That won't happen again. Do people call you Gabby?
They do.
That's why.
And I'm okay with it.
Gabby. Well, welcome.
Hi.
We're glad to have you here tonight.
I'm really grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
You have, I've seen your act.
Yes.
which is fantastic, and I recommend if you get a chance to see Gabby, go out and see her. She's a very, very funny comedian. And you have a very unique sort of association. You talk a lot about treatment in your act.
I do.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that? Like what?
Oh, well, I don't want to brag, but I'm in 4 12-step programs, and yeah.
So that's 48 steps? Is that
yeah.
Or do you only work 3 in each, so that's 12?
No, I'm fearless and very thorough.
How does that happen? How are you in 4 12-step programs?
Well, I think that when you're an addict pretty much across the board.
So you're an addict of
Really?
12-step programs.
I am an addict of 12-step programs. Yes, absolutely. But no, I started in Overeaters Anonymous. I was bulimic for 13 years, and I was actually a compulsive eater since I was a child, and I was born a very normal weight, and then by the time I was 9 months old, I was obese, and so I blame my mother. Hi, Mom.
Yeah, right. Well, be sure to send her the YouTube link on that quote.
Oh, no, she's listening. I would like to give a shout out to Marilyn in Stockton, California.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's right.
Hello, Marilyn.
Yes.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk to Gabby and find out a little bit more about her 4 12-step programs.
Yes, her 4 12-step programs. The number here is 877-830-830. That's 877-830-830. You're listening to KLEAN Radio.
Is your drinking getting worse? Are you taking more pills than prescribed? Do you want to quit, but quitting on your own isn't working? Call KLEAN Treatment Center at 888-601-6040. Our 24-hour staff is here to help you. You can also check us out at cleantreatmentcenter.com. That's clean with a K. Addiction is progressive. The sooner you reach out for help, the better the chances are for recovery. Call KLEAN Treatment Center today at 888-601-6040.
Still disturbed by that dance, Judah.
Just because you can't do it, don't hate. And if Andrew sounds a little down tonight, it's because he's suffering from a cross between, we're not sure yet if it's typhoid or arsenic poisoning.
It's arsenic poisoning or a cold.
And if it's arsenic poisoning, we know who to look for.
We probably do.
My mom was listening in, and she goes, "Don't sit next to the guy that's sick."
I know. I had to take a car ride down here with him. I was like this the whole car ride. Not that you'll see this on YouTube. I was like literally against the window.
No, you should have just hung your head out the window like a dog.
And it's people that are constantly sick will never admit that they're contagious. It's like, just say I'm contagious. Just say you might actually get this thing from me.
Okay, Judy, you're probably going to get this thing
Yeah, say I'm
from
going to
me.
probably be like you next week. And
I hope not. I mean, I've been like this for 10 days, so hopefully this is the end of it. So.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, it was a nasty cold.
And in the studio tonight, we have a amazing comic from what I'm told. I'm not going to say I know you're funny because I have not seen your show, but you appear to be very funny.
Thank you.
And beautiful Gabby Francis. Is that safe to say it like that?
Absolutely.
It's my mother's first name, by the way.
Oh.
So you see the synergy.
Do you have a Facebook page? Or?
I do.
So how do people reach that?
Facebook.com/Gift of Gabriella.
Gift of Gabriella.
So let's get back to this because I'm actually fascinated by this. The number here is 877-830-830. I'm fascinated by the fact that you are in 4 12-step programs. So let's do this chronologically.
Yes.
You started out with OA.
I started in OA.
You became obese.
No.
Oh,
she was bulimic.
She was bulimic. I thought you
bulimic.
said you were obese at some point.
Oh, at 9 months old.
At 9 months old. Okay.
I think that was a joke.
So.
But then I started walking and I worked it off. Okay.
I lost that one. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did the OA.
We did the OA.
Okay.
Let's go to the next.
Al-Anon.
Al-Anon.
Yes.
Was that due to a relationship in your family or with a boyfriend or?
Well, in my case, this is what's interesting about Al-Anon is a lot of people think that what qualifies you for Al-Anon is that you're in a relationship with an alcoholic or one of your family members was.
Uh-huh.
But in my case, my dad was actually in Vietnam, so he was a rageaholic as well as a compulsive eater. And a lot of people don't know this, but compulsive overeaters have the identical symptoms of alcoholics as far as their behavior. And so I was dealing with that. And then my mother was also very depressed.
Did someone recommend for you to go to Al-Anon? How did you find out about it?
Well, this will lead you into my other program, which was I was at a dinner party, and this guy was super cute, and he went to Al-Anon, and I thought, oh, my God, that is perfect. A guy that works a 12-step program but doesn't have any addictions. That's a big myth. Al-Anons are fucking crazy. Oops.
We do have to watch.
You're on the radio.
Doggone it. Doggone it. No, Al-Anons are crazy.
Right.
They are.
So that was your second.
So I started going to Al-Anon meetings, all the ones he was at, and I got a sponsor at his birthday party, and that was that. Never ended up being my boyfriend though.
Oh.
No, but he got me into Al-Anon. God knew what would work for me. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so we have you in Al-Anon now.
Mm-hmm. Debtors Anonymous, Business Owners Debtors Anonymous, because I am a business owner. So.
What type of business?
I'm a comic.
Oh,
That's
okay.
my business. Absolutely. And I also, I work in marketing as well, so that's my other business. And I'm also a makeup artist. And as you can see, I'm very multifaceted, multidimensional.
She has 4 jobs and 4 treatment programs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what else? Oh, yes. And then as of late, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous.
And that was because of your relationship with the guy in Al-Anon?
that they went on a spending spree.
No, I wish that I would have found Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous back then. That would have been a big help.
Oh.
But I think that you find the programs when you're ready,
Right.
So, yeah. Or programs. Isn't that hysterical?
Yes.
Because everyone needs more than one.
So do you consider yourself to have an addictive personality? Is that...
No. Hello. I'm social. I'm very social. I just want more friends.
Well, I guess that's a possibility.
Do you see a lot of the same people in the same meetings? Like, is there
Sometimes.
like a cross?
There's a few here and there. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is the most interesting of the fellowships? I'd actually be fascinated to do a whole study, like a book report on,
A book report?
a book, well, a book report.
Judah obviously just got sober and started when he was in 8th grade.
In 8th grade,
I think you're at, Judah, you're more at thesis level.
Yes,
than book
yes.
report.
Well, thank you very much, Lowell. Yes, I'd love to do a thesis on, which 12-step group is more, where the more fun is to be had.
Oh, wow. Well, I just love, I love connecting in a really deep way with other people. So I took to it immediately. And if someone says, oh, that was a bad meeting, I don't believe in that. I think that it depends on, your intention when you're there. And, like they say in the big book that if you focus on what's bad, then it gets worse, and if you focus on what's good, it gets better. And I try to focus on what can I bring to the party as opposed to what am I getting from the party, and that makes a huge difference in life in general. I think probably most people want to talk about the sex and love addiction, obviously, because sex sells, right? So that's probably what you might say was the most interesting.
Not that I'm buying tonight, but usually it does.
Well, I told two Al-Anon jokes. I got to tell a sex addicts joke. That people want to go to a Sex Addicts Anonymous meeting and hang out in the parking lot and wait for a relapse.
Right.
But no, that's but there is a stigma though too. This is years ago when I was in Israel. My first foray into 12 steps was in Israel, and I would go to these old city recovery groups and in Narcotics Anonymous. And there was a guy I knew named Brad. They're always weird Brads. You never meet really a normal Brad. They're all a little off the radar. Sorry if anybody named Brad is listening, but it's an odd name. Not an odd name.
Unlike Judah?
You become, you become your name. You become your name. you become, I don't know, I'm very big into names.
That's true.
But there was
And when I name a character in a fictional piece of work, the name is the first. Once I've got the name, I've got the character.
Yeah,
that's true.
And
so
there's something to
Gabrielle.
Gabrielle.
What would a character called you to be like?
It's been done.
It's been done.
Yes, Ben-Hur. Yes, there's some great characters. Yes, so thank you very much, Andrew. What do you have, a teddy bear? Raggedy Ann and Andy. But it's like Gabby. Gabby is like pleasant. Gabriella is very, fancy, and it's very regal. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what that has to do with anything.
And so you're not going to call me Gabriella, are you? Because you've made the decision that's not who I am.
You are, you seem very Gabby-ish.
You know what, Judah, back off.
I will back off. I'm in a fellowship for that. But I think it's great. And one of the things I love about the show is that we talk about, and I love that Lowell talked about it, because I never would have expected this out of Lowell's mouth, to want to talk about the scientific approach to things, because I always look at Lowell sort of like, in some ways very cut and dry, and you are in some way, it's perception, and I never thought, and I'm saying this as a compliment, that you'd be interested in finding out the scientific approach to certain things, because I really do believe it is so important as we go into this, to learn about the science behind a lot of, not that it means you're going to be solved with a pill, but just to understand where things come from.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it was interesting when we had Dr. Cohen last week on the program, and I encourage people to go back to our YouTube channel and watch the show from last week if you didn't catch it, or I'm sorry, it was actually 2 weeks ago. But Dr. Coe, I thought he did a really good job of explaining that there's so many levels to what's going on within the brain that we just are beginning to understand, and that the field of addiction mixed with the field of psychiatry is really just beginning to develop. I mean, it's just a few short years ago that people had very primitive understanding of both addiction and psychiatry and psychiatric illnesses in general.
Well, one of the big landmark breakthrough, which came 9 years ago with it from work by NIA and NIDA, which is National Institute of Drug Abuse, was that once you cross that invisible line in addiction, and not just alcohol addiction, but sex addiction or anything like that, your neurotransmitters, your dopamine receptors are changed forever. Nothing is going to change them back. And your brain sends itself the message that there is a reward coming. Even as you go into the destructive behavior, your brain is flooded with this dopamine. It says, but it's going to feel so good. And you ask any alcoholic or addict, the highest you ever are is when you know when you're going to score. Not when you actually take the drug, but on the way to the dope man or on the way to the bar. That is when you're getting that rush.
That's what they say, especially with process addictions like gambling
or sex.
It's not actually once the bet is determined. It's everything up until it's determined.
Right, but the important thing about it is that when you're in a space where you're trying to get into recovery and you're thinking, oh, maybe I can just will myself out of this, or maybe I can just change my situation, but you can't change your brain chemistry.
It's the whole pickle. Once you become, you become a pickle, you can never become a cucumber again.
And that, to me, is part of the acceptance of your disease.
And I think it speaks a lot to this whole issue of morality and, and should we blame addicts for being addicts? We were talking a lot about how Dawn, the caller, might be angry with her husband, and is it his fault that he's an addict? When did he become an addict? Is it a moral failing? Is there an allergy or an illness that he was predetermined to become an addict? And I think the truth is that we're still trying to determine answers to a lot of those questions.
Well, I think too it's a disease with moral implications.
And that's definitely true.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the moral behavior that comes out of the disease looks like sociopathy. You look like a psychopath.
Right.
I mean, you're lying, you're cheating, you have various facades that you use. A classic psychopath. But if, as Hervey Cleckley said in his book, The Mask of Sanity, that when the alcoholic gets sober, he loses his psychopathic symptoms in treatment, whereas the psychopath, you can't treat the psychopath. It's a personality disorder that's
it's very difficult to change.
Yes, exactly.
Now, Gabby, you're talking about SLA. What is the difference between?
I really want to make a comment about this whole Al-Anon thing, and because I was thinking about Dawn when I was sitting in there, and I have found for me in my relationships, not everyone in my life is in a 12-step program, and I've had some tough relationships, a lot with some of my family members and that sort of thing, and I found that once I really, really focused on my own thinking and my own behavior, and I healed, those relationships healed. I think just as though, disease is contagious, so is recovery. And if you bring the light to the situation, it's contagious. And I feel like for Dawn, if she can just make her recovery a full-time gig, and just leave him alone, really, honestly, because you cannot control another person. It's impossible. And to have compassion for him and, and expect miracles. I really expect miracles. He can turn around in an instant. And also just to look at him like a 10-month-old baby, and not to forget why she married him to begin with. Because she did make the choice to marry an addict.
One of the reasons that I really like that we have this show is that, yes, we talk a lot about getting sober, or people that currently have problems with addiction, but we also talk a lot about once you get sober, what does your life become, and what do you do, and what is it that changes once you become sober? Lowell, how was that for you when you got sober? Did you expect what was going to happen? Did you foresee what your life would be like?
If I would have written down the 10 things I wanted the most in my first month of sobriety and then looked at my life a year later, I would have chronically underestimated all the possibilities. In fact, for a long time, I thought it was like Amway. That the more meetings I went to, the more good things happened. But then I found also 5 years into sobriety, I had a second bottom, not a drinking bottom, but that's when I really began to examine the underlying conditions, through step work and things like that, because I have this theory that there's nothing more dangerous than an alert alcoholic and an alert addict, because 5 years into sobriety, my life was so much more unmanageable. When I was drinking, it was like, where is my car? How do I get to work today?
Right, your world is so small.
Yeah, who is this woman that's laying next to me with no teeth? That kind of thing. But then 5 years later, it was, I've got a mistress, I've got a wife, I've got 3 houses, I've got 2 jobs. It just got crazy.
And that's when you're going to Debtors Anonymous.
Yeah, well, but that's when I really got serious and said, there's something underlying here that needs to be treated.
You had a lot of time on your hands, my God, to handle all that.
Well, I think that's the thing, is that when you're drinking,
there is no time for anything else.
There is no time for anything else. And when I was first getting sober in New York, I used to hear these people say, "My God, there aren't enough hours in the day to do what I have to do." And I'd be like, "Try being new like me. Trust me, there's 24. Yeah. There's plenty of time." And I mean, alcoholics and addicts within a day could cause a lot of mass destruction.
Yeah.
You hear our stories, and then it's like day 2.
But if you don't treat those underlying conditions, and a lot of them have moral implications, you can get into far more trouble with that alcoholic personality and that addictive personality, because now you're alert,
right?
And you can remember, and you can manipulate better, and you can con better, and it's like the old story, what do you get when you sober up a horse thief? You get a sober horse thief.
Right.
It's a better horse thief.
Right.
Well, and also I think it's important, that a lot of people that are sober, I mean, one of the main reasons I believe that people go out, from my experience, because most of my friends are in some sort of a program, either Alcoholics Anonymous or not, but that, people go out over finances, they go out over relationships, they go out over so many different things.
See, I have a question about that. I mean, and Andrew, I'm sure can.
We're going to
take a break. We'll discuss that when we come back. The number here is 877-8830-830. That's 877-8830-830. Listen to KLEAN Radio. He cannot define. Bowel shaking, earthquakes of doubt and remorse assail him, impale him with monster truck force in his mind.
Addiction is any behavior you cannot stop that results in destructive consequences. Are you struggling with an addiction to drugs or alcohol? Are you ready to take control of your life? The treatment advisors at KLEAN Treatment Center are here to help. Call us today at 888-601-6040. That's 888-601-6040. You can also check us out at cleantreatmentcenter.com. That's clean with a K. The sooner you reach out for help, the sooner your new life begins.
Is this your, it's your favorite song, isn't it, Judah?
No, it's not one of my favorite songs.
There's 700 gigabytes of content somewhere.
I just want to say I'm sorry for cursing on KLEAN Radio.
That's okay, because nobody heard. But it is sort of ironic to curse on KLEAN Radio.
You will be able to see it though on the YouTube channel video.
So because yes.
So,
but
right.
you know,
unedited.
So we were in the studio. We're first of all with the lovely and talented Gabby Francis, and a great, prolific crime writer, nonfiction and fiction, Lowell Cauffiel,
screenwriter too,
and screenwriter. I always say I love that you were on Forensic Files. One of my favorite TV shows on the air. Okay, so what I love is that we're in the studio during the break and we're going back and forth, and because that's what this is supposed to be about, where there is either conflicting thought or we talk, because for a long time in certain 12-step programs you couldn't discuss these things.
No crosstalk.
There's no crosstalk. The idea of you saying out loud, I need medicine, was a kibosh was put on that. The idea that, you know, which is so diametrically opposed for me to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, where it says, you know, you might need to go to get outside help. Now, getting back to our discussion about, you were saying before the break, you were talking about with your Al-Anon program and, you know, cleaning up your side of the street, which is extremely important because...
Well, just keeping the focus on yourself and being a way shower by example, I think is huge. You know, attraction, not promotion. And I really, you can't control another person. And then you don't even get to know what you want until you know yourself, you know. And I know Dawn was also mentioning that she was using with him as well. And so that could be where they connected. And anyway, the point is that, you know, what we were talking about is that once she has her own house in order, then things will all make sense. Either this relationship will totally fall into place or it won't. And sometimes that could just be amazing. And one thing I know, let go and let God, you know, and if you are really like connecting with your God, whatever that is for you, then again, it's like, really life is like magic. I really see my life in a magical way because there's nothing I can predict, and if I'm really good with me, everything looks pretty beautiful.
Well, you know, and the thing is and the whole thing with codependency, when you're spending your time managing somebody else's life, that's time you're not spending taking care of your own life. In fact, it's a form of addiction in itself, in that it allows you to escape yourself and get involved in that other person's life. And that's exactly what drugs do for you, and alcohol does too. It allows you to escape yourself and not sit with your real self. But you mentioned something earlier that I want to comment on. You said that you've seen people relapse over, you know, bad finances and romance. I see more relapses over good times. There's an old saying that if you're having a bad day, go to a meeting. If you're having a good day, run to a meeting.
It's like either you get the first step or you don't. Can something really make you go out and drink? Using Eric Clapton as an example, his son leapt out, horrifically died. And he came and he was like 2 seconds away from the body, and he saw this and he stayed sober.
Yeah.
So if anything is going to go make you drink, it would be something like losing a son. So people have dealt with cancer. People have dealt with, you know, marriages breaking up. Marriages. Isn't it either you get it or you don't?
Well, I've been through the death of my father, divorce, and in all the things that I thought that would maybe create that situation, it was the last thing on my mind, because I knew it would only make it worse. In fact, it would be a sacrilege to my father's death to drink over that. It just would be sacrilegious because I was comfortable experiencing life as it happened. I couldn't imagine not experiencing it. A quick story: I got in a motorcycle accident. I laid down my Harley Davidson. I hit a deer at 65 miles an hour and was carted by the EMTs into the ER and had broken ribs. I was really screwed up, and I kept refusing pain medication even though I was in great pain. And they took me up to be X-rayed, and they said, "We're going to have to give you something because you won't let us move you." And I said, "Well, I prefer Demerol." But they gave me IV morphine. And when that morphine hit my vascular system, I had a panic attack. I had a panic attack because I suddenly felt separated from reality. And I hadn't experienced that in so long.
Right.
Now, 20 years earlier, I would go crash a motorcycle to go get some Demerol.
We see that actually a lot with people who've gotten sober, especially people that have used a lot of marijuana, where they'll go and they'll smell marijuana and have a panic attack. And it's becoming more difficult now because marijuana has obviously become medicinal, and as people live in condos and apartment buildings now are often exposed to the smell of marijuana a lot more than they were before.
Well, welcome to my world as being just an alcoholic.
Right.
That's that's how I feel on a constant basis of walking around smelling alcohol. I have that thing that happened to me where I feel like I drank so much that when I smell it, I get nauseous.
Yeah, the smell, especially the smell of people that have been drinking the night before.
Yeah, right.
Well, there's a promise at the end of the ninth, not the ninth step, but the 10th step that says if we've come this far, that alcohol will cease to become an issue. We'll become neutral about it. We'll recoil from it as if it were a hot flame. Right. But you can only get to that stage if you've taken care of all the underlying conditions.
Right.
But that's what I'm getting at. That there are, there's the steps and there's this and there's that, but it's like when you get to this, no, we're not sat down as children and taught how to work out finances, and we're not taught. For me, what Debtors Anonymous did for me was it let me have a vision so I could have value. That was really important because I didn't feel like I was worth anything. So even though I wasn't throwing up anymore and I rarely really drank because that really triggered that, bulimia, whatever, and drugs, same thing. But it's like, for me, I think that, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Yes. But it's like, once I went to Debtors Anonymous and I started to really work the program around my self-esteem, around my expression, then I stopped wanting to sleep with other people. Like, instead of my value was what was inside of me, not who was inside of me. You know what I mean? Because that's how I was for so long. It was like whoever I was sleeping with, that defined my value. And so now it's like I have my own value. But I got that in Debtors Anonymous. OA wasn't going to teach me that. OA was going to teach me how to not throw up. But it's like, now what? What do you do?
Thank you.
Good save.
What do you do with your time when you're not binging, when you're not drinking? What do you do? Oh, well, now maybe I have a craft or a hobby or something, I don't know, or I want to excel in my career. But it's like, who's going to give you those tools?
Well, the greatest thing that I've found in long-term sobriety, and this has just been in the past 6-7 years, is the ability to just sit with myself and be completely okay with that. To not have to go anywhere, not have to do anything, to just sit with myself and know everything is good. It was Christian Murty, who was this philosophical guru kind of guy, said that spirituality is the ability to perceive reality as it is. And, what is the reality right now? It's not what's going to happen tomorrow. It's not what happened yesterday. It's the fact we're sitting around having a conversation, and that's all there is. And there's a beauty in just, I don't want to sound too woo-woo, and I'm not going to burn some incense, I promise. There'll be no incense. But to be in the now and to be completely comfortable in the now.
Well, I'm one of those people, and I know I make people uncomfortable for a wide variety of reasons, but when I'm on an airplane, I have no problem just sitting there. I have no problem sitting on an airplane for a couple of hours, nodding in and out. It's almost like a break. And I enjoy just sitting on the airplane. I don't have to read anything. I don't have to watch anything. And it's a very content feeling to just sit. And which was one of my worst fears.
This is why Judah has airplanes on his bedspread at home.
Yes, I do. And what's amazing is Raggedy Ann and Andy. When I was a kid, but my mother said.
But it goes to exactly what Gabby's talking about: is to be okay with yourself.
Yeah.
To actually realize who yourself is.
Right.
Yeah.
And for me, I put that in spiritual terms. It's a spiritual state. It's not my brain. My brain is only a tool of my soul, myself. And in fact, I've reached the ability now to watch my brain go through all these machinations and laugh at it, because I don't center myself in my brain anymore. I center myself in my spirit.
But I think
therapists have a saying for this, and it's called mindfulness, and it's a big movement right now within therapeutic communities, and it's about being aware of the present. And I think a lot of it comes out of Buddhist philosophy,
Yeah.
but it's something that we're becoming more and more attuned to the fact that there is this disconnect that people seem to be having within our society, and we've gone from the old days where people were just alcoholics, and now we've got people addicted to the internet and to gambling, and something to fill up that void.
Because there's a
time.
constant thing that you could
sit with yourself.
I mean,
you can't just sit there and experience. You eat, and you don't even realize what you ate.
I've done this, and I'm sure you've done this. You go on, let's say, Wikipedia. You could literally, from one page on Wikipedia, 6 hours later, have clicked your way into the most wells of useless knowledge possible.
Probably that you have cancer.
Right.
All things on the internet lead to you have cancer.
So when you're performing, you talk about all these, you talk about your SLA.
Yes.
And do you feel like people are connecting with you more? Because you obviously have a wide range of topics to discuss,
Yes.
that you joke about. Do you feel like that people have a connection?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because it's honesty. And again, people are just very attracted to anything that's real. Absurdity is fun too. I do have, some absurdity.
Well, there is
within my
absurdity in
act.
it.
Absolutely. Well, and that's true. But what's funny is what's the most absurd is who I really am.
Right.
Like without writing an absurd joke, just being who I am is pretty absurd, like you said. Yeah, absolutely. But again, isn't it funny? Because it's like when you begin, you think anything other than what I am is probably going to be what's really funny, and then you come full circle to just being with the stillness of me and who that is, and that actually turns out to be the funniest of all.
Well, yeah, it's
does your comedy, do you vent your anger in your comedy? One of my screenwriting teachers, Robert McKee, said that comedy is the angry art, and it allows us to express ourselves in an angry way.
No, I'm not an angry comic at all. No.
I can't even imagine you being angry.
No, I can be angry. Ask my mom.
Do you rage at all in your act? Do you?
No.
What was that question? I didn't.
Did you
rage?
No.
I would say that my character, me, Gabriella, is more just befuddled by it all, and just like.
It's almost like you're an observer looking in.
No. Just meaning like more frustration and confusion and naive, but also knowing, and so kind of more conflicted, I think, but not angry.
Who do you comedic wise? Who are some of your?
I really like. I like Sarah Silverman. I think she's great. Chelsea Handler and I don't have anything in common except for who I used to be, but I love the fact that she's so authentic and that she keeps it real, that she's just who she is. I think that's a great quality. But I like John Caparillo a lot. He's just he is. You'd like him?
I'm not familiar.
Oh, you don't know him? Yeah, he's great. He's wonderful.
I have a hard time watching Chelsea Handler. Because I have a hard time when I could see people that are drinking, that are in alcoholism. It makes me feel extremely, there's just something about it.
Right.
I don't mean that I want to drink.
I understand.
I feel the pain of what that person's going through.
Yeah, but here's what's great about when you work this like awesome Al-Anon program is you start to, it's like what I call my religion, which is live and let live. That as long as I'm fully expressing myself, as long as I'm fully, connected to myself, then what other people do and say really doesn't bother me, and I can actually be amused by it or intrigued by it or entertained, whatever.
Well, sadness in my case.
You feel sad?
I feel sad for her.
You do?
Yeah, it's not like I look at her and she's a very funny woman. The show is great.
Yep.
But obviously there is a sadness if you're, she's 33, 34. She looks, no offense, she looks 42, 43 years old. She looks.
That just could be her genetics, though. Like, we have to look at what is our projection and what is real.
Oh, yeah, no,
You know what I mean? Like
Low.
The comic that I just have always loved is George Carlin, and and because he strips the facade away, and that's what I mean by anger. It's sort of the destruction of the facade down to the real. He's such a great writer. I mean, Carlin was such an incredible.
Well, but
writer.
it's not so. But okay, so let's change the word, because was Carlin angry, or was he just speaking his mind?
I thought he got angrier as he got older.
Right, he did get angrier as he got older, but there was a certain, it's like if Lenny Bruce or any of those, if you're just speaking your mind, is that anger, or are you just talking?
Yeah.
And I mean, and there is
it's just honesty.
Yeah, right.
That's
there is a
yeah.
thin line between, angry, mad. It's network. I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to.
Well, you can say things in comedy that you would like to say in just a regular social circle, but you'd be ostracized for doing, but because you put it within the context of a joke, you get truth out, and it doesn't offend people as much. I think that's what a lot of the great comics have in
It definitely
comedy.
offends people sometimes.
Yes, I've seen Lisa Lampanelli perform quite a few times, and
I've crashed and burned. Yeah.
What do you is when you crash and burn? Is there an excitement to that?
No.
No. It's
Absolutely
just
not.
crashed and burned.
Oh, it sucks. It really sucks, and it hurts a lot, because especially for someone like me that's a people pleaser, like I just want everyone and anyone to love me no matter what. I'll do anything.
So now
here's if you look at the terms of the comics use, when they do great, they're killing.
Right.
There's so many about the angry art. They kill, or I killed out there.
Slaughter that audience.
Yeah, I slaughtered that audience. But if you what do you call it when you're having a bad night?
Yeah.
You die, right?
Yeah.
You're dying.
Yeah.
But if you're doing well, you're killing them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a few years ago, there was a symposium that was done by Anderson Cooper. I don't know if you saw it. It was with Chris Rock,
I saw that.
Jerry Seinfeld, Robert Klein, and Gary Shandling, and it was, I think, one other person. And I loved Gary Shandling because they were all talking. Gary Shandling was the only person up there that was willing to crash, that was willing to go up on stage every night and not be funny. And the pain that he had in him by willing to go on stage and to not be funny, and you were just talking about people pleasing.
Yeah.
Is that hard as a comic when you know something is an easy laugh, or when you really trying to go for the what can make you superior? Is there a thin line? Does that?
Can you?
Okay,
rephrase that
so
question?
for instance. You know comedy obviously very well, and you know what is going to get a crowd going.
Yes.
So, and being a people pleaser, you constantly want to laugh.
Yes.
Is it easy to go for the easy joke? Is it sometimes harder to go for the harder joke and be willing to not get a laugh?
Okay, for me, We're
going to take a break,
yeah.
and we'll get back to that when we come back. The number here is 877-8830-830, 877-830-830. You're listening to KLEAN Radio.
Is your drinking getting worse? Are you taking more pills than prescribed? Do you want to quit, but quitting on your own isn't working? Call KLEAN Treatment Center at 888-601-6040. Our 24-hour staff is here to help you. You can also check us out at cleantreatmentcenter.com. That's clean with a K. Addiction is progressive. The sooner you reach out for help, the better the chances are for recovery. Call KLEAN Treatment Center today at 888-601-6040.
Back to KLEAN Radio. I'm Judah. We're in the studio tonight with the lovely and bodacious Gabby Francis, whose mom is listening at home. Hello, Mom. Marilyn, right?
Yes.
Where is home?
Stockton.
Is that where you're from?
I am.
I have no idea where Stockton, California is.
Between San Francisco and Sacramento.
Okay. Considering I really don't know where Sacramento is.
We were just voted the most miserable city in America.
Really?
So, the second time in.
Worse than Newark?
It's Forbes magazine.
Well, I won't say this because people vote, but really, so you're from How long have you been in LA?
Over 10 years.
Do you enjoy it?
I love it.
Did you come out here for comedy?
No, I came out here for acting, but with all my afflictions, it wasn't really possible to produce anything.
Right. So how long have you been doing comedy?
I started in 2004 was my very first performance, and then I didn't really get off the ground running, except for the last 2 years.
And have you, which is the last, so the last program so have you found that, the 12-step programs has helped your comedy?
Oh, well, I didn't even know I was a comedian until I got into the program.
Okay.
Because once you start putting down all these addictions, then you get to find out who you really are.
Right, which is because when you're in the addiction, we were talking about before, it's almost like a full-time job.
Yeah.
It's like a 24-hour.
Hard work.
It's hard work. It's hard work.
Yeah.
It's sort of fascinating that you're working for one thing.
Right.
Well, it's the low self-esteem. When you are just completely riddled with low self-esteem, then you don't believe that you can amount to anything. And that's where I was coming from for most of my life. So once I got this idea that I could amount to something and that who I was enough, and that if I just started telling the truth about the fact that I was from Stockton and that I was addicted to all these things and people and blah, 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 then I actually found that I was totally lovable.
Was there something about Stockton that you were embarrassed to admit you were from Stockton, or?
I always thought that my life would be better if I came from a rich family, if my dad wasn't in the military, things like that. But today I am so proud of my family, and I'm actually super proud to be from Stockton because it has to be one of the worst places in the world and the best place to make jokes about. Like, it's awesome.
Has anybody famous come from Stockton other than you, of course?
Chris Isaac.
Mm-hmm. I like Chris Isaac. Actually, played a few songs of his today.
Nick Diaz, the UFC fighter.
I'm not familiar with UFC fighting. If you don't let the body
so
hear. Don't let my body fool you. And my dexterity.
Ultra lightweights.
Yes.
So Judah, UFC's with midgets. That's
yes. Andrew, political correctness.
I'm sorry.
Little people.
Oh,
okay.
No, I'm sorry.
Andrew's not feeling well. He's suffering from typhoid and arsenic combination. But getting back to it, before the break, we were talking about, we're all people pleasers a little bit. We all want to make people happy. And I'm guessing, is that hard when you're performing? Is there a line between wanting to make people happy and making yourself happy? Or is it? Absolutely.
There definitely is a line. And the only way that you learn what the audience wants to hear from you is by doing it. And that's what I had to do. I had to just keep experimenting. And the audience likes to hear me say really ridiculous things at times, and also really intense, true things. And I'm leaning more towards the intense, true things because I think that that's more healing to, the world. And I'd like to think of my comedy as transformational in the sense that I'm bringing my recovery to, the world, really through the back door.
There's so many comics that have come through here so far, and it seems like the one thing that everybody has in common as a comic is that they all have some sort of message they're trying to tell through their comedy. And it's interesting with all the different comics we've had, how they all have this different perspective, but there's some sort of really moral sort of story they're all trying to tell. There's like this narrative that they've created, and they're trying to tell you that narrative and lead you to be with them.
Well, as a writer, Lowell, I mean, do you feel like where you've led readers has changed, where you want to lead readers has changed in like the last 20, in a sense that you feel a more moral responsibility? You stop writing crime fiction. You've written, scripts, you've written pilots for TV shows. Do you feel the difference in the writing?
Yeah, in the beginning of my true crime career, it was more about exploring evil, what the nature of evil was. And in fact, that's what got me into my first book, was that as I got into recovery, I thought, what's wrong with me? How am I any different than these? Why did I not go out and kill somebody?
What are morals, and where do they come from?
Yeah, and all that. And so a lot of my early books were exploring those little decisions that people make in their life that take them from just neurotic or resentful to homicidal. Because I wanted to know where that
the hop, skip, and where that line is.
I wanted to know where the line was in myself.
I'm a big believer that people have a narrative in their head, that they have a story in their head that they believe about themselves and that they're acting out on.
Right.
So did you find that with people that you wrote about, that they had sort of a conceived idea of who and what they were, and they were playing off that idea in their head? or do you think they were driven by impulses?
I got to tell you, that's a great question.
Well, I think they were driven by they let their impulses get away from them, and they begin to chip away at the guardrails within themselves, and criminals, they start out small and they just begin to take away the guardrails, and it finally gets to the point where homicide seems like a good solution.
Right.
And
a viable one.
Well, because there are differences between Dahmers and people that are just
there's people with personality disorders,
right,
like narcissistic personality disorder, psychopathic personality disorder, those kind of things. And so once I got that taken care of in those earlier books, now I come from a place where I want to take characters kind of down to the bone and show that we're all having different versions of the same experience, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Because we really all are having different versions of the same experience. It's all about fear. It's about security. It's about what Gabby's been talking about. It's about being okay with the self in different ways to get there. And so my writing has gone more towards that.
Do you have anything coming up, or?
I'm out pitching actually a couple of shows right now. I had a show that was sold to NBC last year that didn't get picked up. The great thing about LA is they'll pay you a lot of money to write shows that never get picked up. So it
used to be more so, right?
It pays the bills. But I've got a book. All my books are still in print. But my last nonfiction book, called The House of Secrets, is in its 20th printing. It was a New York Times bestseller.
What was it about?
It was about a very, very sick, dysfunctional family of 13 kids and a patriarch who, very dark. It's a very dark story. They go on a cross-country crime spree.
Well,
and
what's amazing is that could almost be comedy. There's a really, a family going across.
Especially the fact they were in a 24-foot motorhome. You imagine 13 people living in a 24-foot motorhome. Yeah, it was very crazy.
Only in 1967.
Yeah, but that was actually my last true crime book. That took me to a very dark place, and I was done with it after that because it was so dark. But yeah, one of the things, there is such a thing as evil. I mean, that last book that I did really convinced me that there are people who are just
there's no redeeming quality.
Yeah, no redeeming quality, irretrievable. Their main purpose is to completely feed themselves. I love M. Scott Peck's definition of evil, and that is the wielding of power in any form, whether it be financial, emotional, physical, to keep one from examining themselves. And that's one thing.
Which is really the antithesis, or is direct opposite of any 12-step program.
Right, which is about examining yourself and taking responsibility for your side of the street.
And Gabby, where can we see you performing?
Well, you can see me performing. I've just gotten off a pretty long run of doing a lot of shows, so I'm actually on a little bit of a break right now. But I wasn't even prepared to do it.
Website?
It's Facebook.
Facebook, and how do we? What? Gabby Francis?
No.
Gabriella.
Gift of Gabriella.
Gift of Gabriella?
Yeah.
That's a great.
Well, Gift of Gab was taken.
You're like all spiritual and stuff. It's like
it's had a lot of steps to get there.
A lot of steps. I mean, that's 48 steps to spirituality. That should be your.
One question I have actually about that, because I'm sure that more cynical person would be like, if it's 12 steps and you're in one program, why can't you just apply that to them all? Why is one 12-step program different than another? Why is it important to? If you examine yourself through a series of 112 steps, shouldn't you just be a 12-step and then it's over?
Yeah. No, because you really have to admit the powerlessness over that one particular thing, and it's, again, I just think it's very finite, and
I have to be honest, by the way, I think it takes a lot more courage to join the 12-step groups that you've joined, because it's not the cool ones.
Absolutely.
It's not the, hey, I'm in AA, or hey, I'm in A. You're like, hey, I'm in OA, I'm in Al-Anon, I'm in Debtors Anonymous.
The heroin addicts are
and I'm in Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous.
It's totally true.
You don't discuss that at dinner conversation when everybody's, it's the old thing, it's like, it always drives me crazy when people say a drug is a drug is a drug is a drug. Really, the next time you're at a dinner party and everybody's having wine, pull out cocaine and say, drug is a drug is a drug. And you're in one of those things where it takes a lot of courage to admit that. And I really mean that from the bottom of my heart to say, to say those things, because that's pretty cool.
But it is true. I do feel really inadequate in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. I did stop drinking in July, but
so do I.
It's because I really want to fit in, actually, and so I just stopped drinking. No, but
shake your head a lot.
No, but I want to I want to feel like I fit in. I want to participate, and I do feel like I wish that I was an alcoholic, because I would just like to identify with alcoholics.
Well, I think that's the hardest thing. And you were talking about your father, you were talking about family stuff, and the hardest thing, I have a great relationship with my father, but the hardest thing about anything that's not alcoholism or drug addiction is that if you're an alcoholic or you're a drug addict, you could say, oh, it's the alcohol and the drugs that are making that person who they are. But if you're just a mean workaholic, if you're just an angry person that doesn't drink, then you can't label it. And I think it's really hard sometimes when you can't label that.
Well, to Gabby's point,
but we can't mention that name on the air.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Well, to Gabby's point, though, I wanted to just mention that there's a difference between identifying directly with somebody through sympathizing with them because it's similar to you, and then also being able to relate to them with empathy. Right? You don't necessarily have to have cancer to be able to empathize with the person that's suffering with cancer.
Not at all. Right. Yeah. That's just a commitment to humanity, really. And I think that I am a very empathetic person, just by nature. I've always been like that since a child, and I think that the person I needed the most empathy for was myself. And once I got that, then I can truly be of service. I can truly be there for you, and for you, Judah, even though you have that name.
You're a kind soul.
So one of the things that I see in treatment and with therapists is that, especially younger therapists when they start out, is that they tend to center on working with the type of therapy that they have their own problem with, and so it's interesting to hear your comment. We're just about done here,
and we would like to thank Lowell Cauffiel for coming into the studio tonight. You can find him at Lowell Cauffiel at Facebook. And read his spectacular blogs, and you could find
all my books are available on Amazon.com.
And Amazon.com, not Amazon.com UK. It's Amazon.com. And Gabby Francis, The Gift of Gabby.
Gift of Gabriella.
The Gift of Gabriella.
Next time.
And you can find Andrew and I nowhere that spectacular as these two to our left and right.
On KLEANradio.com.
Is that it?
KLEANradio.com?
KLEANradio.com. KLEAN.
It's been our pleasure. It's been my pleasure. It's been great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming down.
Thanks, you guys, so much.
Thank you so much.
And we'll see you next week. Talk to you next week.
Suspect a loved one is abusing drugs? Call KLEAN Treatment Center at 888-601-6040 for a free drug test and consultation. A treatment advisor is available to help you administer the test and answer any questions you may have regarding treatment and more. We are here to help. Call us today at 888-601-6040 or find us online at KLEANtreatmentcenter.com for your free drug test and the start of a promising future.